Hello everyone, welcome to the channel of Political Science Tutorials, a channel for all students of political science and related social sciences. If you are preparing for any competitive exam, hope these videos will help you a lot. Watch till the end and please share your views. Okay, in this video, as our topic mentioned, about Jeremy Bentham's theory of utilitarianism. The main questions related with this topic will be addressed in this video are: who was Jeremy Bentham? Second, what is utilitarianism? Key principles of his theory. Then, what critic says. And number 5, the relevance of Bentham's theory. Now, the first question is, who was Jeremy Bentham? Jeremy Bentham was an English philosopher, social reformer, economist, and theoretical jurist. He is best known for his work on utilitarianism. Now, let us take a quick look at his early life and education. Bentham was born in the year 1748 in London. He began his formal education at Westminster School. In the year 1760, at the age of 12, Bentham was sent to the Queen's College, Oxford, and was one of the youngest students to attend the university. After Oxford, Bentham enrolled in Lincoln's Inn in 1763 to pursue a career in law. But quickly he became disillusioned or dissatisfied with the British legal system, which is complex. So he aimed at simplifying and rationalizing the legal system. He was influenced by the Enlightenment thinkers of his time. The Enlightenment thinkers emphasized upon reasons and human happiness. Their approach was scientific, and Bentham, as a social reformer, was influenced and developed his theory based on reason, and the center point was human happiness. Now the question is, why did Jeremy Bentham create utilitarianism? Here you can see that though Bentham was eligible to practice law, he refused it and aimed for a system where laws will be simple and developed utilitarian principles for the betterment of society as a whole. He not only suggested to reform legal system but social institutions also. He was a strong supporter of democratic reform, of universal suffrage, shorter annual parliaments, and the secret ballot. And the British legal system was not promoting these democratic values. So he was in support to provide clear and simple laws. His view was that the laws that existed were obscure and cumbersome. Therefore, he tried to provide concise laws through utilitarianism. Now, the question is, what type of utilitarianism Bentham developed? Bentham developed act utilitarianism or hedonistic utilitarianism. Here to remember that there are two types of utilitarianism: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Bentham's student and follower J.S. Mill developed the theory of rule utilitarianism. And he developed the theory which suggests that moral actions should be guided by rules. We will discuss about it in another video. Now the question is, what is utilitarianism? Basically, utilitarianism is a moral and ethical philosophy in political theory. The traces of theory can be found in ancient Greek philosophy, but this theory was popularized because of contributions made by Jeremy Bentham and J.S. Mill. This theory advocates actions those provide happiness or pleasure and opposes actions that cause unhappiness or harm. In other words, this normative ethical theory that suggests that the best action is the one that maximizes overall happiness or pleasure and minimizes overall pain or suffering. And the theory is often summarized by the principle of the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And here is an important point, that the theory of utilitarianism, as it concerned with the greatest happiness for the greatest number, it is influential in various fields like moral philosophy, political theory, economics and law. Now let us start with Bentham's utilitarianism with 5 key principles. Bentham was in view that the moral and political rightness of an action is determined by its utility. And this utility is the greatest good of the greatest number. So, only those actions are right which promote happiness and wrong if they produce pain. As already mentioned, Bentham became disillusioned with the British legal system. So, his first step was to writing his proposals and the suggestions criticizing the British legal system. And at the same time, he proposed reforms based on utilitarian principles. Thus, his first book, A Fragment on Government, was published in the year 1776. In this book, he introduced the principles of utility. His suggestion in this regard was that laws and institutions should aim to maximize happiness and minimize suffering for the greatest number of people. So the systematization was taking shape of his principles of utility. The years passes by and Bentham continued to refine his ideas through writings on a wide range. And the topics included law, ethics, politics and economics. And where was his focus? Throughout, his focus was on promoting the greatest happiness. In the year 1789, he published the book An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation. In this particular book, he elaborated his ideas on the principle of utility and detailed his ideas for legal and social reform. The basis of the theory of utilitarianism is pleasure and pain theory. At the beginning of the introduction to the principles of morals and legislation, Bentham writes, "Nature has placed mankind under the governance of 2 sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. Human behavior is governed by the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. And the best action is one that maximizes overall happiness and minimizes overall pain. Now our third question is, what are the key principles of Bentham's utilitarian theory? Here we will discuss in 5 points. These points are principle of utility, hedonism, quantitative approach, universalism and consequentialism. These are 5 key principles of Bentham's utilitarianism. The first principle is principle of utility. Bentham prefers only those actions which are morally right, and this rightness will be judged solely based on their consequences. Any action which produce happiness or pleasure, that is good, and the opposite, or any action produce pain or suffering, is bad. The greatest good of the greatest number is the most important formula of Bentham's utilitarianism. His principle of utility counts every individual. One man is worth just the same as another man. This is his principle of utility. And so there is a guarantee that in calculating the greatest happiness, each person is to count for one and no one for more than one. Bentham was an individualist, and for that reason he presupposes that one man is worth just the same as another man. So everyone's happiness and pleasure counts. The second principle is hedonism. According to Bentham, every individual is naturally inclined to seek pleasure and avoid pain. The theory of hedonism also focuses on pleasure as the ultimate good. Bentham believed that pleasure and happiness are the fundamental components of utility. Now the question is, what is so moral about an individual seeking his pleasure? Bentham's theory is not of selfish psychological hedonism. Rather, his theory is based on ethical hedonism. So here Bentham's answer is, in deciding whether to act in a particular manner, one has to be impartial between one's own pleasure and that of all those affected by that act. In other words, individual's own pleasure is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is the greatest happiness of a community. The individual is a part of that community only. So, Bentham's utilitarianism is concerned with the happiness of others. Hope this point is clear now, what Bentham meant by principle of utility. Already mentioned, Bentham's theory of utility is based on pain and pleasure theory. And his pain and pleasure theory is a quantitative approach. Means pleasure and pain can be measured. Hedonic calculus involves considering 7 factors, and these are: number 1, intensity. How strong is the pleasure or pain? Means the intensity of pleasure can be measured by its degree of strength. Number 2, duration. How long will the pleasure or pain last? Means time period or time span or continuation of the feeling of pleasure and pain. Number 3. Certainty. How likely is the pleasure or pain to occur? Means without doubt it can be predicted that when pain or pleasure occur. Fourth, propinquity or remoteness. How soon will the pleasure or pain occur? Means the gap or remoteness of occurring the pleasure or pain. Number 5, fecundity. Fecundity means capacity to produce. Whether pleasure lead to more pleasure and pain lead to more pain. Sixth, purity. Will the pleasure not be followed by pain or the pain not be followed by pleasure? Seventh, extent. How many people will be affected by the pleasure or pain? Means the range or stretch. Through these criteria, Bentham proposed pleasure or pain can be measured or can be calculated. Fourth principle of Bentham's theory is universalism. Bentham's theory is universalistic in nature. He was an individualist and considered each person's pleasure or happiness is of equal importance. Means when making moral judgments, each and every person should be considered. There are some ethical theories which falls under the framework of consequentialism, and utilitarianism is also one of them because it emphasizes the consequences of actions. In Bentham's theory, the moral worth or any action is morally good or bad is determined solely by its outcomes or consequences. Specifically, the overall happiness or pleasure it should generate. And for this reason, Bentham's theory fall under the theory of consequentialism. After this discussion, here is a brief assessment. There are three essential elements in Bentham's utilitarianism. First, whether an action is right or wrong is determined solely by its consequences. Second, the value of the consequences of an action is assessed in terms of the amount of happiness or well-being caused. Third, in assessing the total happiness caused to a number of people, equal amounts of happiness are to have equal value. No one person's happiness having greater value than that of another's. Hope these 5 points of Bentham's utilitarianism is clear to you. Now, let us see what critics said about Bentham's theory. Bentham developed his theory when Great Britain was not a democratic state, but the process was started, and the contributions of the political thinkers, philosophers, economists were immense. Bentham suggested some democratic reforms like universal suffrage, secret ballot, and short-term parliament. His aim was to reform the legal and political system, and through which the greatest happiness of the greatest number could be established. Whatever may be, critics pointed some shortcomings of his theory. Like, number 1, focus on pleasure. Critics say human nature is complex. Only sensation of pleasure and pain is oversimplified. For example, in some cases, individual feel happy only for his own gain. Sometimes he becomes happy for doing something for someone, and other feelings and reactions also matters. Second point, again, every individual has their personal desires. If the aim is always common benefit of the largest number of men, then personal desires would be overlooked. Number 3, Bentham's utilitarian theory follows a method to calculate pleasure and pain. Here the question is it possible? Basically, it is impractical. Any calculus cannot measure or compare or calculate different types of pleasure and pain consistently. Different individual has different feelings, and people, those who constantly seek pleasure, may not find it pleasure in that action. Number 4, as Bentham's theory emphasizes on consequences of any action, whether it is right or wrong, so it misses the process. Sometimes immoral actions lead to pleasure, but there are broader ethical principles like justice, duty and rights, etc. These are also important and should be taken account. Accurately predicting the outcomes of actions is often difficult or impossible, which undermines the practicability of utilitarian decision making. Number 5, the outcomes of actions are in black and white for Bentham. In other words, the outcomes are either right or wrong. But in practical field, there are a gray area. In other words, maybe to some extent right or wrong. Bentham neglected this perception. Number 6, the main principle of Bentham's theory is greatest happiness for the greatest number. Here, critic says, if majority's happiness emphasized, then minority's interests may be overlooked or neglected. Okay, these were some points which critics mentioned against Bentham's utilitarian theory. Though these points are quite relevant, but his theory has provided a significant perspective to influence various fields like moral philosophy, political theory, law, economics, etc. In modern democratic system, the main aim of the state is to maximize social welfare and justice, and Bentham's principles influenced these reforms. Again, the concept of welfare economics is based on the principle of well-being of the population, which has an angle of utilitarian principle. Modern welfare state supports those policies which aimed at reducing poverty and inequality, and for this reason promote the idea of redistribution of wealth, and here also need a utilitarian angle. Bentham advocated clear codified laws which main aim was to promote greatest good and led to reforms in criminal justice, penal systems and civil rights. This was a brief discussion on Bentham's utilitarian theory. Hope the lecture will be helpful for you. If you liked it, please hit the like button, and for any doubt, write in the comment box. In the next video, I will discuss about Bentham's political philosophy. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.